Yeah, I think we get taught, like most of us, especially in the Christian community, you're just kind of programmed with the mentality of happy wife, happy life. So
Right.
it's like,
Well,
just
let's
keep
take
mom
that-
happy,
Yeah.
and keep her happy, and then everything's good.
Well, let's take that apart.
Right.
Okay, let's go.
Why does
dive
that
deeper.
happen?
Let's dive deeper into that first issue within our specific sort of focus, which is Christian men here, women, of course, as well. The issue that we see playing out so often is that we are told by our church leaders to treat our wives like Jesus treats the church.
Mm-hmm.
And we compartmentalize Jesus's interaction and his behavior with the church and only select a few of the behaviors we think we need to implement. Being a servant,
Sacrificing your life.
self-sacrifice. Those are the two things that we see most often happen. And then men will lose themselves in that. And we fail to understand Jesus's, what he did for the church was he redeemed it. He's going to judge it. He also admonishes it. He loves it. It's encompassing a real relationship, but he is the head.
And you're
right?
saying
So
they
we're
only
in
focus on a
submission to it.
couple of these
So yeah,
points.
we only focus on a couple of these points, and so in turn, we have men who are just shells of men, right? Because they think they're doing the right thing by being a doormat, by just listening, and basically whatever the wife says, because a happy wife is just not going to happen. So, I mean, if you're doing coddling, pandering to your wife, are you really loving her? Are you? And these are the questions we're asking the blue-pilled out, sort of, these men who haven't put enough time into their reading of the Bible. They haven't been reflective enough what a man should be. These men are just being fed by the popular conventions of the Western church. This is what a man should be. And they're surrounded by men who are doing the same exact thing. They're overweight. They're not they don't have any desires or hobbies that are being supported by their wives usually. They're not really alive so much as they're a shell of a man. And so the issue is we're not absorbing Christ as a person. We're picking pieces in like the progressive Christians are, and we're saying this feels good. Because the hard part is, say, admonishing your wife, leading your wife, truly leading your wife, right? There is no such thing as a happy wife. And half the time when the Old Testament
There is no such thing as a happy wife.
I wouldn't say there's a happy wife, like as if something you can, like what I mean by that is you can't change somebody. It's kind of like where we
What you
began
mean is like
talking
your
right now.
wife's happiness should not, her emotional state should not be dependent upon 100%
Exactly.
on you.
And that's fair for everybody. I mean, otherwise
could
you
it-
could go out and just like, influence people to do whatever. That doesn't work that way in this world. You
Agreed.
have to be accountable for your own emotions.
So how does
I was gonna say, so how does frame now come into that?
I think frame is the recognizing the roles that you've been given. Is if we're talking from a Christian perspective, talking about the roles that have been given for man and for woman. And this is where you enter into the messy topic of egalitarianism, right? So people get this correct. Man and woman are valued the same in God's eyes. Paul says there's no Greek, there's no Gentile, there's no Jew, there's no man, there's no woman. God sees him as his children. So God loves these people equally, right? Their value is equal. However, we're not equally good at stuff. Men have things they're better at. Women have their share of things they're better at. That's because we're supposed to be on a team and fulfill our weaknesses or their strengths and vice versa. It makes sense, right? So in the church, they'll be like, well, we're not equal. You say, well, men and women aren't equal. That sounds like people are, when you say that, what they're really hearing is men and women are not equally valuable. So there has to be a distinction made, right?
Right.
So when frame comes into this, women are submitting to their husbands. Their husbands should have earned through their lives the ability to make the choices through self-sacrifice, some of the stoic principles you see in the Bible.
quote, build a frame,
Build a
worth
frame.
living in, right?
Have discernment, have some kind of semblance of being a provider for your family, all these other things you have to do. Once the man has those things and has accomplished his frame, the woman has to fit herself into that. That's where God made her to fit. That's what the Bible tells us. Woman is supposed to submit. Submit doesn't mean agree. People hate that. Submit doesn't mean, oh, I see where you're coming from. Submit means,
You think
yeah.
like doormat?
No, submit is a brutal word when you really want to take it apart. Submit means you're going to listen even if you disagree. Otherwise, you're just agreeing.
Or some people would call that maturity.
Well, if you're in the military or you're some other form of hierarchy, you're going to submit, right? And so a wife is going to have to trust that her husband is making the right decision, even if she doesn't agree with it. That's going to have to happen sometimes. That's why she submits to the husband. There's tons of reasons why. We might look at it from a biological perspective. Women have an incredibly tumultuous hormonal phase that they go through every single month. They get more emotional. Every single woman who has a period will know this. If you've grown up with women, this is a natural function of their biology, and it causes their hormones to do a lot of crazy things. And so it makes sense that with a man in the background, if they were to encounter some kind of a critical thinking thing, they could rely on their man during that process to make the decisions, right? So there's one. The bottom line is God says it should be that way. So we have to accept that. The problem in the church is we're not living in the man's frame. We're living mostly in the woman's frame, okay? So that's where I see frame from a biblical perspective.